Hello everybody, and welcome to the newly renamed Filmmaker J Studios, back with a brand new tutorial all about noise reduction with no plugins required. Now, to get right to the point, I'm sure some of you out there have been searching around for noise reduction tutorials, and probably some of the ones you've seen aren't quite getting the results you want. And frankly, that's how most in After Effects problem-solving solutions are kind of like. They're almost there, or they're effective in very specific instances, but they really can't work for every instance, and they're not as effective as the purchasable plugins that you might buy for specifically noise reduction in this case. But interestingly enough, I have stumbled upon some very effective tutorials, and I've mixed and matched information from different tutorials, even between different programs in the Adobe suite, to answer my problems, to solve my problems with the videos and films that I'm making. And one of the most interesting ones that I just stumbled upon this very day, I knew I had to come right out and share it with everybody, is noise reduction, specifically for splotchy noise. Now, if you look in here, this is a shot from my latest film, Bill and Maggie's Intergalactic Taxi Service. It's the film that I've been focusing on for most of my tutorials on this channel so far. And as you can see, there's this terrible, splotchy, like high ISO noise going on right here in these red curtains. And this is both due to ISO and due to the fact that the shot is very, very dark, and I had to brighten it up quite heavily to get it to, well, not as heavily as some other shots, but I had to brighten it up quite a bit to get to this level here. But as you might notice, the background behind the curtains is actually a digital 3D model that's been rendered as a JPEG, or actually a PNG in this case. So there's no frame-by-frame animation back there, so there's no artifacting at all with that. But also, there's no artifacting and no noise in this gray area. Very, very little, including on our actress. No major splotchiness at all on her either. It's just here in these red curtains. So unlike some shots where you might have to do noise reduction on everything, this technique is probably best applied to specific regions, even if it's the majority of your shot, like if it's one big red wall, which I have in some of my other shots. If it's just one big color, or all of your dark regions, or some other specific range of regions in your image, this effect should be most effective in that kind of situation. So let's dive right into this, because I'm excited. I'm excited to show you guys how this is done. So initially, the way I learned how to do this is I went on to Flern.com's YouTube channel, and I saw a video all about frequency separation, which is this idea of taking a high-pass filter of one layer and subtracting a blurred version of color information from that layer, so that all you're left with is this microscopic, like dark gray, light gray, and middle gray details that give you all of your edge detail back and all of your texture back. And then you can blur the color information beneath that, so that you essentially smear everything and get rid of all your blotchiness, your discoloration, specifically from skin tone. It was actually a skin smoothing technique for, touching up photos. But I realized, wow, this can actually be really effective for noise reduction in video if it can be applied in After Effects. If the same technique can be applied in After Effects, then it would solve so many issues with noise reduction without ever having to buy neat video, without ever having to mess around with the internal noise reduction effects. This would actually solve so many problems. So let me start off by pre-composing this as the original footage, because you never know if you want to swap this footage out with something else and then have it go up this chain of pre-comps to get back to the same effect in something else. You always probably want to pre-comp your original footage this way, so that you never have to swap around a bunch of copies of it. You always just want to go right back to the original. So then we duplicate this 2 more times. We pre-comp these first 2. And now we have this. This will be our blurred noise. This will be our original footage. And what we actually want to do this with this one is do a curtain matte, because later we'll want to isolate just the curtains rather than the whole image. But now let's go in here. Now, the way that I was able to figure out how to do the frequency separation in After Effects, since After Effects has no frequency separation effect, it has no apply image effect, it has nothing like that. The way I figured this out was because I found a guy on CreativeCow named Darby Edelen, circa April 7th, 2008, and his post, which is named Anti-Aliasing with Threshold. Or at least it's a part of the thread called that. And this was his response, explaining that you can actually take this top footage right here, go into Channel, Invert, change the opacity to 50%. This makes everything middle gray because it's actually taking this bottom one and an inverted copy and mixing them evenly. Then you go up here to blur, get a box blur, change it to 3 or 4 iterations, and change the blur radius to 1.4. And let's find a better frame in here. Right there. Can you see it? This is what a frequency separation looks like, at least as far as the Flurn video is concerned. This is basically it right here. And the cool thing is that it moves. Holy crap. So yeah, there's that solved. Thank you so much, Darby Edelen, for figuring that shit out. That solves that issue. So what's the other issue? Well, the other major issue is how do we blur the other footage here? Because if we go back to this one, how do we blur this so that this can be added on top of it? Because what we got to do in here is change this to vivid light, which is what Darby Edelen explains. You got either overlay, soft light, hard light, linear light, or vivid light. And there's kind of a different amounts of strength that these actually reveal your edge detail information. And linear light actually goes a bit overboard. But I found that vivid light is the best choice for this kind of noise reduction technique. So we'll stick with that. And then now we have to deal with this color information down here underneath this. So what do? Well, the trick I realize is that I want to smear the colors here. I don't want to blur them and fade them out, because if you just use if you just end up trying to use a box blur, that spreads them out that way. Use a Gaussian blur or a fast blur, that just kind of blurs everything in that way. And it gets rid of all your detail, because if you plop this on top of this, it just looks kind of weird, because now you got all these like posterization edges here, or like a plastic effect or something on top of just blurred colors. That's no good. But I knew there had to be an effect that blurred colors but didn't blur anything else. So then I found Bilateral Blur. And this is a little labor intensive, but when it's done, bam, there you go. Even without the edge detail from this layer, what it essentially looks like it's doing, at least to me, is that it takes the high contrast areas of color and light and sharpens those, but then blurs all the like colors together. And if we kind of turn that one down, turn this up to maybe like 28, then this solves our issue of getting rid of all these splotchy areas here. So then we add that back on. There's your other details. But now we just want to do this on these areas. So what we have to do, actually, duplicate this again, bring this down, take these two, pre-comp them, so that now you got the whole thing on here. Take rid of that. See how big of a difference that makes? It just blurs those colors out enough that no more splotchiness remains. But now the other trick is we have to isolate the curtains here. So let's go into the curtain matte. Go into keying, key light, and we're going to be doing something very similar to what I did in my green screen video for removing green screens, which I learned from another YouTuber who was very smart in his technique, which he partly learned from Video Copilot. So there is a pretty big chain sometimes of who learned what, who then reused and revised another effect to do their own thing, and then I borrowed it from them, you know. It's just kind of this borrow, revise sort of a thing. You just build off the education of your predecessors. So let's go into combine matte. Or actually, got to grab this red color here. And actually, what I learned is you ought to grab a really, really dark red. Yeah, see, so now this is all turning dark. Her face is still white, and what we actually want to do is try to isolate the curtains, but keep her face untouched. And as you can see, we actually need to invert this so that the white areas are the curtains so that they show up, but the rest of it doesn't. So let's go into channel, invert this, get out a levels adjustment, kind of push these all the way to the end. And then we need to blur this as well, just a bit. So let's do a Gaussian blur. Let's do this up to 30. Turn that off for a sec. What I also want to do is I don't want to leave these black areas because these are other major problem areas of noise as well. So what we ought to do is something else I did in my green screen video, which is draw masks around static objects so that you can keep those other details as well. So let's turn these off. Up to here. And just draw around that curtain and around the other areas up there. Kind of get around this. Come down here. Get this too. And I'm just kind of softening up this because I don't really want to get that area because later on her arm goes right through that spot. So I don't really want to mess with that spot there. Let me go over here. Get these ones. There we go. And I guess we can do a little circle right there. Then we take all these masks, open them up, change this to about 6, I guess. No, we need something more like 15, 20. 20 should do. Okay, and then we turn all these back on. There you go, and then Gaussian blur. Might even want to take this up a little higher, maybe like 35. Yeah, there you go. That's just about right. Okay. So then we come back here. Let it load a bit. Effects and presets, set matte. I already did it from last time I did it. Go up to here, change this to luminance, curtain matte. Oh, you know what? I just did that to that. That's weird. Okay, yes, what we need to do actually. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, we have isolated those very specific spots. We've blurred them out. It does lose some specific color details there. But I think if you play around enough with the blurring here, maybe turn that down to 25. Something else you can actually do is go in under this blurred noise one here, which has our high pass filter in there. You can add a levels adjustment to this. And the ones I figured out to make this really stand out is you change your input black to 31, your input white to 194, and your gamma to 0.76. And that's almost untouching it, except you're enhancing some of the details in here. This might not actually help our darker areas here, but nonetheless. In fact, yeah, it really doesn't help the dark areas too much. But overall, the real question is, does it remove the noise or doesn't it? So let's do a playback of the original footage here. There you go, still terribly splotchy and kind of just distracting, frankly. And a lot of this can actually happen. What I did is I put a LUT that changed my GH4 Panasonic footage here, brought it back to a good level of saturation and skin color, or even just levels adjustments and hue and saturation without a LUT can really kind of break the information in here. So that's how this really gets emphasized, is through a lot of color correction. Whereas without it, it might actually look okay. But this should fix it. Now let's see what it looks like with this blur applied. That's much better. Granted, it can never be perfect unless you shoot it much more effectively on the day that you shoot it. If you use more light, or use a better ISO, or use a better lens, or maybe a camera with a better sensor in it, you obviously can reduce the noise in the initial raw footage. But in this case, I think this is mostly helpful, maybe not for initial ISO noise, but more so for color correction noise that is brought to light by pushing and pulling your levels a bit too much. And as I said before, that's basically how this noise came to be as prominent as it is here, because I had to shift around a lot of the levels to get this image to this point. And I'm still going to be putting another LUT and a few more levels adjustments on top of this afterwards. So I may want to actually do that before this noise reduction in order to make sure that these curtains still stay pretty flat and uniform. So there you go, folks. There's my interpretation of the findings of Mr. Darby Edelen from CreativeCow and Flern.com with their frequency separation tutorial for Photoshop, now being applied very effectively to video footage in After Effects. I hope this video was extremely enlightening for you, and hopefully it will solve most of your current noise reduction issues, minus an expensive plugin. Keep in mind, though, I still stress that this effect should only be applied to problem areas, areas of interest, specific regions, specific colors, maybe just your dark spots, your shadow areas, that sort of thing. Don't apply this to the entire image unless the result is something that you actually want to have. It's a little dreamlike, to be honest with you, if you use it over the whole image. I would say it is more suited to a waking dream or some sort of flashback. It's probably best effective for that if you do it over the whole thing. But if you're just trying to deal with noise, isolate the noise areas and deal with them on their own. So, with that said, thank you all for watching, everyone. I hope to see you all again soon with another exciting tutorial about After Effects and filmmaking, and I hope you all have an awesome, awesome day. Filmmaker J out.